Hello. This presentation answers several questions related to the economics of the Home Depot's business. This is Group 17, consisting of myself, Amber Ott, Bonnie Norris, Kate Organ, and Justin Northam. The main question we will be answering in this presentation is how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the Home Depot's business? We will answer this question by answering several smaller questions that break down specific tools of analysis related to economics. Kate is going to go ahead and start us off.
So how has the demand for gardening supplies changed compared to pre-pandemic for Home Depot? Demand for gardening supplies, along with many other home improvement products, saw a significant increase due to people changing their lifestyles as a result of the pandemic. People have picked up lots of new hobbies and are wanting to make home improvements because of extra time they're spending at home, so that's one of the main reasons for the increase in demand. Thus, on the graph, you see a shift of the demand curve outward, showing more quantity demanded for gardening supplies. Home Depot has since struggled to keep up with demand given supply chain challenges resulting from the pandemic. Specifically, gardening supplies like seeds have either increased in price or become temporarily unavailable given the rapid and unexpected increase in demand. Thus, we see on the graph a shift in the supply curve to the left, increasing the equilibrium price and reducing the equilibrium quantity for gardening supplies. So how has the demand for gardening supplies changed? Next, what impact have the supply chain disruptions had on large
This is Bonnie Norris, and the slide that I'm going to be going over today is how has the pandemic impacted the supply and demand of lumber at Home Depot. These numbers are approximate and do not reflect the true price of lumber at Home Depot. This graph shows the shortage in supply for lumber. D1 represents the demand before the pandemic, D2 represents the demand after the pandemic, and points A to B represent the shortage in supply. Now, the supply is represented by the orange curve. The equilibrium price before the pandemic would have been at point A, and the reason that there is a shortage is because the supply was not able to increase to match the increase in demand, which would eventually drive the price up to point C. Here we have the producer and consumer surplus, and this is before any price increase. So this is just showing that if the producers or if Home Depot does not raise prices raise their price for lumber, then there's going to be deadweight loss. So B is the producer surplus. A and C would be the consumer surplus if there was not a price increase, and then D and E represent the deadweight loss. Now, the reason that there's deadweight loss here, or that there's not the reason that supply cannot just increase to match the demand and keep the price the same, is because the people who make lumber or supply lumber have to grow trees, and the trees take time to grow. So the sudden increase in demand, there's no way for the suppliers for lumber to match that sudden increase in demand. So here I'm going to talk about how the lumber shortage has impacted the price of lumber at Home Depot. Again, the numbers are approximate and do not reflect the true price of lumber at Home Depot. This graph is just to show that the supply of lumber is relatively inelastic. Now, as you can see here, the yellowish line represents a more relatively elastic supply, and then the orange line represents a relatively inelastic supply. Now, one of the reasons that the supply of lumber is relatively inelastic is because there are not a lot of substitutes available. One of the only real substitutes available for lumber is steel, but a lot of people who are looking to purchase lumber don't want to purchase steel because you can't really build a patio out of steel, especially here in Arizona. So what ends up happening here is the price of lumber has to increase. One of the reasons that the price of lumber has to increase is because the producers want to maximize their surplus. So on the previous slide where we had the dead weight loss, now producers are increasing the price to point E2, and the producer surplus is going to be the triangle B, and consumer surplus is going to be triangle A.
How has the current labor shortage
Hey everybody, it's Justin here, and next we're going to look a little bit about how the minimum wage increase has affected Home Depot. The increasing minimum wage throughout the various states can act as a price floor. This graph here shows labor supply and labor demand, and it highlights the change in producer and consumer surplus with the change in the minimum wage. So prior to the minimum wage increase, the producer surplus, or the A and B areas, and then the consumer surplus were going to be the C, D, and E areas of the graph. When the wage increases, the number of workers available increase because more people are more willing to work for higher paying jobs, and Home Depot and the other businesses are less likely to hire workers, and they're trying to find other ways to continue business operations with less employees. This creates a price floor at the new minimum wage price, and producer surplus becomes the A and the D areas, and consumer surplus shrinks to E. And this means that the C and B become deadweight loss areas. This effect of the minimum wage increase can be observed in Home Depots as they introduce self-checkout stands to reduce the number of workers required to help customers check out. And lastly, we're going to look a little bit about what Home Depot's competitive advantage looks like and kind of the type of market they participate in. Home Depot does not exist in a perfectly competitive market, but instead in an oligopolistic market where only a few key players exist. This means that there are a good number of barriers to entry, as a large number of capital, resources, technology, labor, and more are required in order to compete. Additionally, whereas perfectly competitive markets are price takers, oligopolistic markets are price makers, meaning they have the ability to set their prices based on their market share. This is also why in oligopolies, it is important to know what your competitors are offering and how they differ. Because consumers have so few options, it is crucial to stay competitive. Oligopolies maximize their profit by producing where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and oftentimes also see kinked demand curves that account for the difference in elasticity in the wide variety of products that are sold. And obviously, Home Depot is not independent of the external factors that control individual markets, such as the lumber market, but because they are in an oligopolistic market, they have the ability to keep their prices cheaper than their main competitors and focus on offering unmatched customer service and high market saturation.
In conclusion, the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the business of the Home Depot greatly. It caused demand to increase for many goods. At the same time, many factors, including supply chain issues, labor shortages, increase in minimum wage, has caused shortages in many markets. These shortages caused prices to increase. Since the Home Depot is an oligopoly with few other firms to compete with, they were able to raise their prices and maintain their business. Thank you for watching our presentation.